Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com, on Roku, Dwyer Boxing and Sports News. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. One of the best fights that could be made, one of the absolute best fights that could be made in the entire sport of boxing, has been made. It's Gennady Golovkin against David Lemieux, right? Both guys are devastating punchers. An argument can be made that both guys belong on boxing's list of the hardest punchers pound for pound, right? Now, let's say this. It's my opinion that Golovkin is the more complicated fighter. Because in the ring, I'm not sure early in a fight where Golovkin's going to be. In other words, while Golovkin eventually is going to be raining big shots on you, Golovkin is cautious. He's outside of the pocket. He's looking at you. He's not high volume at the opening bell. He's looking at your movement. He doesn't approach you until he figures out where you're going to be. In other words, if I just stay in the pocket and if I don't aggressively move forward, I can't hit Golovkin early in a fight. Spacing is a bigger part of his game than David Lemieux's game. I know Lemieux is a mid-range hooker. I know Lemieux is going to try to hunt me down. I don't have to go looking for David Lemieux early in a fight. I know I can just stand there and he's going to come up to me. Now, the two men fought Marco Antonio Rubio. You need to look at films of both fights. They're interesting. Understand, both guys were unbeaten when they faced Marco Antonio Rubio. Now, Lemieux found Rubio early. Right? Lemieux's dominating that fight early. Right? In a way, it's kind of like Vladimir Klitschko against Layman Brewster. Lemieux looks like it's going to be a typical Lemieux night. But then Rubio, after being roughed up, after getting hit with rough shots, actually turns the match into a boxing match. Right? His straight right hand starts to land. His jab starts to bother Lemieux. Then we have the worst, in my opinion, the worst possible type of stoppage. Lemieux's corner, sensing that their fighter had no answers. And the fight's 4 years ago. Right? Lemieux's in his early 20s. He's in his mid-20s now. Right? Lemieux's corner throws in the towel after Lemieux starts getting hit with big shots. Now, when you look at the end of that fight, I just want you to consider the fact that that's in the middle of the fight. I believe it's like the 7th round. Lemieux, who is getting hit with shots, right? Who is facing major adversity for the first time in his career, let's just say was in such an unfamiliar position that I'm telling you that more experienced fighters with corners who, quite frankly, believed in them more would have let the fight continue. The idea is, I have a guy with show-stopping punching power. He was dominating this fight a few rounds ago. He's in trouble now. If we could just get him to the stool after this round, maybe he can recharge his batteries. Maybe we can convince him to make some adjustments to his game, right? Because it's Rubio's straight right hand. Maybe we can give him a different blueprint, and he can then clear his head for a couple of rounds and get himself back in this fight. Right? That's not what happened. That's how thin the line is between success and failure for David Lemieux. right? His egg gets cracked. There's no going back. His corner realizes that. He had an unbeaten record at the time. His corner stops the fight. Let's just say while he's getting a bit beaten up toward the end of that fight, it's not like the guy had a gaping cut that was going to jeopardize his future. It's not like the guy was out on his feet. And so the corner's thinking, what's this ref doing? I've got to save my guy's life. No. He was just in the deep end of the pool. He no longer was alpha. He was beta. The corner understood he can't handle being beta. Now, let me say this about Golovkin. I know it's hard to believe now, because every Golovkin fight seems to be Golovkin steamrolling an opponent. But Golovkin was in a dogfight against Kasim Uma. Understand, the guy who is going to give Golovkin the most trouble is going to be the guy who can get underneath him and work his body, right? Whose area of attack is, let's say I'm Golovkin, right here, right? Think Tyson. Think Frazier. Think Dwight Cowie back in the day, right? Guy who's up on you, can lean on you, and go. Think Chavez, right? The guy who Abel Sanchez is trying to patter Golovkin off of. Here's where Uma is on Golovkin, giving him a hard time. Now, David Lemieux is roughly the same height as Golovkin. Lemieux's a mid-range hooker. I don't believe he's going to be right here. He's going to be right here. It's going to be a little bit different, right? I do think either guy can win this fight. I just don't see how with this dynamic, right? A guy who needs to be alpha against a guy who is going to stay away early and then come in and try to take advantage of his defensive shortcomings, right? I don't see how this fight goes the distance. The top play I'm recommending on this one is to take both guys by KO. I just don't see how the fight goes the distance, right? Lemieux, this isn't the Hassan and Jickham fight. This isn't a fight that's going to linger for several rounds, right? Because understanding Jickham is moving out of the pocket. Golovkin is out of the pocket, but sooner or later, he's going to be throwing bombs. He's not relying on a jab and movement. Understand, Lemieux is not defensively gifted. He's a hunter, right? I believe mentally, right, as well as chronologically, Golovkin's a little bit older than Lemieux, right? Golovkin fought extensively as an amateur. Golovkin, highly disciplined guy with a highly disciplined trainer, right? They go to Big Bear to train. I think Golovkin is the person who can handle adversity better than Lemieux, right? My primary bet is going to be distance, that the fight doesn't go the distance. I'm not going to fool around with over-unders. I want all 12 rounds on it. If the odds allow, if I had to pick a side, if I had a gun to my head, the side I would pick would be Golovkin. Simply because I believe Golovkin is smart enough not to have his back on the ropes, right? And is going to, be harder to find than Lemieux. And the plane at which Lemieux fights isn't the plane that gives Golovkin the most trouble, right? As I said, if you could get inside Golovkin's arms and be short range, and low, that's a problem for him. Right? I'd take Andre Ward against Golovkin. Even though Ward's a taller fighter, Ward can fight low. Right? David Lemieux fights a little bit higher. If Golovkin can extend his arms, that's going to be a problem for David Lemieux. Right? So my primary bet is to take both guys by KO. That's really the bet I plan on making. Right? If I had to pick a side, I'm leaning toward Golovkin. Just know that I don't expect this fight to go the distance either way. Right? Kasim Uma was on the downside of his career when he tested Golovkin, and Uma was a volume puncher. Right? He was a volume puncher who really didn't have the punching power of David Lemieux. If Lemieux gets close enough, right, gets mid-range, and is able to land some big punches on Golovkin, I don't think we've ever seen Golovkin get hit with this kind of power and be able to fight through it. Right? But understand the flip side. We've seen Lemieux fail spectacularly in a fight. I'm not even talking about the Alcine fight where he's just simply outboxed. I'm talking about the mental anguish that was the 7th round against Marco Antonio Rubio. Right? Understand his corner didn't think he was ready for that level of adversity. Now I know it's 4 years later, but understand, even though he fought Gabe Rosado, he hasn't been in the ring against a guy who firmly believes he's the hunter in the fight, like Golovkin is going to believe. Right? Understand, too, that while we look at Golovkin's resume and say, well, who really has he fought? I'm telling you, Daniel Geale is a hell of an opponent. I know Geale has fallen on hard times in the ring, but understand that's because Geale is fighting hard men in the ring. Cotto, right? Golovkin. And let me say, too, think about Golovkin's amateur career. He KOs Lucien Boutte. You need to research that. Right? Golovkin was a whale of an amateur. So he's seen a lot. Right? He's the more elusive fighter here. Right? Lemieux better land early. If I'm Lemieux, in fact, let's just talk strategy for a second. And I'm not a boxing trainer. But if I'm Lemieux, I have to play games on distance, spacing, early in the fight. Right? I can't show my comfort zone early in the fight. I know Golovkin is going to be trying to read my feet and trying to read where I'm going to be. So in my opinion, I have to bluff all that early. Right? If I'm Lemieux, I don't just come across the ring with my plan A. If I'm Lemieux, I actually spend the beginning of the fight moving around the ring, understanding that Golovkin is trying to figure out what my pattern is. Then if I'm Lemieux, I also spend a big portion of camp trying to bend my knees and fight low, trying to make sure I can bend my knees and still have the leverage on my punches that I have when I'm just mid-range hooking. Right? The idea is to fight the guy not from mid-range, but with a shoulder on him. Right? From real short range. Right? That's what I would think about. Also, if I'm Lemieux, on the way in on Golovkin, I might not throw punches. Right? I might just try to come in. Right? Golovkin to me doesn't throw the straightest punches himself. I might just try to come in to back him up against the ropes. That's where Lemieux was most effective against Njika. Right? Come in and think position first before punch first. right? Muscle the guy over to the ropes, then go to work on his body, right? Tucking ahead, getting inside his wheelhouse, right? If I'm Lemieux, I have, to me, more to think about than Golovkin, because I believe Golovkin thinks about stuff like this every fight. Anyway, that's how I see it. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for me here online. This is a big fight. We'll make further videos as more information comes down the pike, right? Just understand, Lemieux is a real opponent for Golovkin, right? Understand, though, we've seen Golovkin against mid-range hookers before, right? He dismantled Matthew Macklin, right? If he gets Lemieux on his back foot, I'm not sure if Lemieux knows how to play the hunted well. I believe he might crack like he did against Marco Antonio Rubio. I encourage you to look at the last round of that fight. Let me hear from you. Thanks for stopping by.